Well, thank you very much for listening to my talk. I'm very excited to address you and to be here with you at this conference of the Napa Institute. And so I am Msgr Martin Schlag. I'm Professor for Catholic Social Thought, and I will be speaking about lessons from St. John Paul II on Woke Capitalism. And I'm so happy to do this in this year because it is the 100th anniversary of the birth of St. John Paul II. Wokeness originally meant avoiding bias against African American people in business and society. And no Catholic can be against wokeness in this sense because Catholic means everyone, katholos in Greek, everyone. And St. Josemaria used to say, there's only one race, the race of the children of God. There's only one language, the language in which we express our love for each other. There's only one skin color, the skin color of all children of God. So in this sense, nobody can be against wokeness. The problem is that wokeness now has embraced the progressive agenda of deconstructivism. So deconstructivism is a philosophical current that suspects hidden structures of domination and oppression in traditional social, sexual, family norms. And it pivots around the concept of freedom. Freedom is understood as free choice, and in an extreme way, it means being free to define my own nature, to define what is good and evil. One day I can be a man, then I can choose to be a woman, then I can choose to be neither. Then I can define myself. And free choice justifies free choice. We see this on university campuses, that sex is okay as long as it is consensual, and we're realizing more and more that consent doesn't make good sex. There are norms of wisdom in the Catholic tradition that are more consonant with human nature. So wokeness in this sense is not a fight against oppression, but a fight for recognition with the aim of institutionalizing themselves and thus being able to oppress others. Where does this weird counterintuitive philosophy come from? And I was asking that myself when I was preparing this talk. And I went to Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, the German atheist, crazy philosopher who in his lifetime, so I think he sold 5 copies of his books, but after his death, he became so influential that we can say we are now in a Nietzschean era. And I took his book in German, Also sprach Zarathustra, in Old English translation, it's Thus Spake Zarathustra. And Zarathustra was a Persian deity, and Nietzsche kind of identifies with this person, and he decides to go back to humanity, to the humans, to tell them that God is dead. And so he goes down and he says, he speaks to the last humans, and he tells them, human nature, humanity, is not an aim, it is a bridge. It is a taut rope from the last human to the Übermensch, to the Superman, to the Overman. And what does this Overman do? He defines what is good and evil. He can be whatever he wants, and he tells them the story of the camel, the lion, and the child. And says the camel is the animal that kneels down and lets the heaviest burdens be placed on its shoulders, and it's always like in the desert and in the dark, and so at a certain point it morphs into a lion, and the lion has killed God. The lion now can do whatever it wants, and it redefines all values, it inverts all values. Compassion must become self-affirmation, humility must become pride, and the lion has written on it, I want, and I will. And he, in the desert, it meets the dragon, and the dragon has golden scales, and on each scale is written, thou shalt. And the lion must kill the dragon, and once it has killed the dragon, then it can become a child that, in complete innocence, affirms itself and according to its own values and its own, creation. And so I was thinking, how can you be so diabolic that you conceive of your freedom as a competitor to God, or to conceive God as competitor to your freedom, where in reality God is the creator of your freedom. He's the guarantor of your freedom. He's the one who maintains you in your freedom. And as a matter of fact, Zarathustra, Nietzsche, once gets up in the morning, looks in the mirror, and sees the devil staring at him. And he says, well, that's a sign that my teachings are being misinterpreted. And I would say, no, you were seeing yourself, and it's true. You have this diabolic notion of freedom, which is also we can find in Feuerbach, which we can find in Marx. In order for the human being to have dignity, God must disappear. He must be completely erased from the awareness of humanity. It's like, how can you think that? And in a certain way, Nietzsche is a parody. He's aping the path of Saint Therese of Lisieux, who also taught a path of spiritual childhood, but he was inspired by love. And so how does the Catholic tradition answer Nietzsche and wokeness? With love. With love. And Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, among others, but he formulated it so beautifully in a booklet he wrote, De Diligendo Deo, of the love to God. He says, there are 4 steps. The first is the mercenary, who loves God because of what he gets. The second, he calls it amor mercenarius, mercenary love. The second step is the servile love. It's the servant who serves his Lord, but does so out of obligation. The third step is filial love, where we experience that we are children of God, and we trust him and we are united to him. And the fourth step, the final step, is mystical love, where we are united to God, like in a matrimony, wedded to him. So what has happened to Western civilization, that a civilization that was able to produce people like Bernard of Clairvaux and Thérèse of Lisieux, now is in an era of progressive wokeness. And St. John Paul II spoke of a betrayal of the West of its own constitutional principles, a betrayal of the great heritage that made it great. And I agree with him. The development of political thinking in the West is an epic narrative of emancipation and liberation from all kinds of forms of tutelage and dominion, but along the lines of Christian anthropology. There was always a notion of the human person that was imbued with the notion of image of God, not an image of ourselves, which is the only consequence when God is dead, as in Nietzsche. If God is dead, then I'm an image of myself. I make myself. I can become an Übermensch. It's crazy. We run into a wall. But this is what has happened. So in the 16th century, when Europe was embroiled in confessional wars, people said, no, we need peace. So since then, political philosophy has been a succession of centuries. We can actually kind of really pinpoint it down to centuries, where one central value became central. One main value was seen as the answer to the challenges of the time. And so in the 16th century, it was peace. Then, when absolutism had become oppressive, it was freedom, and we have liberal constitutionalism. And then in the 19th century, with the Industrial Revolution and the poverty of the masses, it was justice, including everyone. And frequently in this process, the liberal forces opposed the church. We see this especially in the French Revolution, that from its outset was directed against the church and religion because of the political privileges of the clergy and their involvement in the old regime. And so it took about 100 years, 150 years for a mutual reconciliation of modern political life, modern society with the Catholic Church. And this took place at the Second Vatican Council. And it's so beautiful to hear St. Paul VI in his kind of final speech at the end of the council. He said, we were motivated by great optimism. And the Church in the Second Vatican Council was once again, like the Good Samaritan, bowing down over humanity. And it was inspired by this trust to the human person. And however, so this was in 1965, but in 1968, this optimism ended. It was when the sexual revolution struck, and since then, we have been continuing this narrative of seeming liberation and emancipation along the lines of an anthropology that is incompatible with Christian anthropology. This is the great betrayal of which John Paul II spoke. And so how did he react? Well, he reacted by speaking incessantly of the human person, the centrality of the human person, and reminding us that, with the words of the Second Vatican Council, Christ reveals man to man. And, the human person, he reveals humanity to the human person. And he also stressed the importance of freedom, and but freedom along the lines of Christian anthropology. And part of this freedom is the right to economic initiative. He spoke of the importance of private entrepreneurship, private entrepreneurial activity as expression of freedom, as an expression of creativity, as an expression of initiative. So, we should not be surprised that wokeness has entered business, and that we now speak of woke capitalism. We ourselves have been telling business that they need to live corporate social responsibility. But of course what we meant was along the lines of Christian anthropology. But so they just took part in the general atmosphere of culture and said, well, they interpreted this as wokeness, or some of them did. And so woke capitalism is simply part of the betrayal of the West of its own founding principles that has been going on since 1968. Nothing to surprise us. So the question is, what lessons can we learn from St. John Paul II, from dealing with woke capitalism? And I think there are three. The centrality of the human person, the centrality of the family, and the centrality of entrepreneurial activity. So let us start with the first, the centrality of the human person. I remember one story that the spokesman of St. John Paul II, Joaquin Navarro Valls, told me. They were in a meeting on interreligious dialogue, and Navarro Valls asked John Paul II, well, how should we speak with people of other religions? Of what should we speak? And JP2 didn't hesitate. Without hesitation, he said, speak about the human person. Speak about the human person. And keeping in mind that Christ reveals man to man and woman to woman. It's our Christian faith, our Christian anthropology is so beautiful that it attracts by itself. And we needn't worry too much. We needn't worry too much about how can I formulate that. It, Jesus said to us Christians, "You are the salt of the earth and the light of the world." And he didn't say you're the honey of the world, the honey of the earth. Honey, everybody would have loved honey. Makes everything sweet. But he said salt. Salt burns. Salt, you can't eat salt. You mix it into a meal and then it dissolves, it disappears. It's a humble spice. So we too, we enter the world as salt. And light, you don't see light in itself. Light is also humble. Light brings things into visibility, other things. So we are salt and light. And Jesus says, you just be salt and light. You just be real Christians. I'll take care of the rest. Our Christian message is so attractive. So yes, we are in a mess. Okay, we are in a mess. But let's try and turn the mess into a message by not participating in things that are against Christian anthropology. So, centrality of the human person. Second, the priority of the family. And family in Greek was called oikos, or that was one of the different names for family, oikos, and which means house, household. And economy comes from the management of a family. And in the Catholic social tradition, private property in rerum novarum is justified by saying that private property is necessary for the freedom and independence of the family. So the family is prior to the state. It comes before. And again, I think more than arguments, what Christians simply have to do is to show the beauty of love in a family. It is so attractive. It's self-evident that is attractive. And actually that is why the devil always has to act with lies and distortion. He's envious of the beauty of human love in fruitful and procreative human love. And the third is the centrality of entrepreneurship. And woke capitalism is mainly a phenomenon of governments and big business. And big business, big corporations are actually just as dangerous as big government when it opposes free markets and competition. And Adam Smith already reminded us that a business doesn't like free markets. What business people want to do, some of them, especially when they're big corporations, is to raise the prices and lower the wages. That's exactly the opposite of what competition does. Free competition, and especially in a growing economy, raises the wages and it lowers the prices. So the vision of St. John Paul II for the economy was a market economy. He called it good capitalism and distinguished it from bad capitalism. And he said, well, we could also call it a market economy, an economy of enterprise, an economy of creativity and initiative. And so this is achieved easier with small and medium enterprises, and those are like at the center of the concern of Catholic social teaching on business. So the centrality of the human person, the centrality of the family, and true free markets in a ethical and religious context with a legal framework, that is the way forward. That is the way in which we can, full of hope, rely on Christ's message and make a message out of the mess.